All right, everybody. Welcome. So this is the SaaS Monday series that we've slowly been transitioning into talking more about agentic SaaS and talking about the practical aspects of building agentic SaaS. And part of that journey, as you think about building agentic SaaS, one I've kind of been experiencing myself is the developer experience. We all start off with these huge ideas about code. Hey, I'm going to build this thing. I'm going to throw it out there. It's just going to work. And then we discover the same exact journey that every developer before us has gone through, where somehow I've got to package this thing. Somehow I've got to put it in front of my customers, make this repeatable, make it so other developers can do the same processes alongside of me. And that brings me to a really interesting conversation that we're looking to have today about how we accelerate that developer experience in terms of SaaS testing, right? Because if everyone forgets about the testing stuff until we're actually launching it, like, wait a second, we got to make sure our customers actually can have a reliable experience. And right at the dead center of that, of all of this developer experience, of all of the testing, is Docker. And Docker has been, for me, for my personal developer journey, been there almost from the very beginning. And right up to like yesterday, when I was deploying some of my agents onto Fargate containers, where I was running with Docker locally, trying to test all of this stuff and figure out how to make it work. So how does Docker and test containers work? And with that, we're lucky enough to have a guest today, Eli Aleyer. Am I saying your name wrong? Aleyer?
Aleyer. It's
Aleyer.
all good.
Okay. All right. I was close. I'll give myself half bonus points. Is the head of technical alliances with Docker. We're lucky enough to be joined by him today. Eli, why don't you introduce yourself real quick and a little bit about your background?
I'm Eli. As you mentioned, I work for Docker. Have been here for the last year and a half, doing a lot of technical alliances. So figuring out who are the types of players we should be partnering with, and doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. Prior to that, I built a small company called AtomicJar that we exited to Docker. The company was behind an open source technology called Testcontainers that allows developers to do better integration testing directly from their IDE. Prior to that, I spent, many years at Amazon, at Microsoft, at Pivotal Software, and then eventually at VMware.
Awesome. That's a great journey. And as usual, we're joined by Michael Cooper and Kamal Gupta of Omnistrate as well. Guys, you just want to say a quick hello and then we'll kind of hop into the questions here? Coop?
Sure. Well, first, hello to both my friends, Bill and Ali. I've drank around the world a couple of times with both of you. We've debated many of these topics in weird bars in London and weird bars in Singapore. And so it's kind of fun to actually kind of talk through these here. It's also kind of fun to see the transition that the industry has gone through, because I mean, Eli, as he said, went back to the early days of AWS, early days of VMware and the rest. And the concept of abstracting software from hardware has been a journey that the industry's been on for a while. We're seeing that rapidly accelerate, and where you're testing in one spot and building in another and deploying in a third it's a fascinating time to be alive in the industry, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Nice. Come on.
Hello, everyone. Great to meet you all, and great to see you, Eli, again. Yeah, super excited about this discussion. Looking forward to it. So let's dive in.
Yeah, let's get into this. So, Ali, before we get too far into this journey about where you came from and what you've been doing, I want to maybe just hear a little bit about the reasoning for AtomicJar joining Docker, because this must have been a really interesting and pivotal point in your journey. And a lot of the people listening to the show are startup founders, people on this SaaS journey. So, tell us a little bit about how you decided to scale AtomicJar, like what it was that made it a success, that got a company the size of Docker to recognize the opportunity there and to decide to acquire.
So I think a lot of credit goes to the underlying technology that we helped popularize, right? So Testcontainers as a technology really allows individual developers to be a lot more productive and allow them to test things locally on their local machine without the need of a platform team or anybody else knowing. When we originally, the technology was built about 10 years ago and it came out of the Java ecosystem. and allowed Java developers to be able to say, hey, as opposed to building an environment or as opposed to waiting for someone giving me a staging environment, all I really need in order for a particular test case to run is I need a Kafka, a MySQL, a Postgres, or whatever other dependencies one needs. And really write in code that, hey, before the test case runs, give me those instances, fire them up for me, get them going for me, test my code against them, and when you're done, let them all disappear. Right? And this concept of being able to be self-sufficient without anyone's permission and being able to test code a lot more effectively as a concept is a great concept, and developers caught up to this. Over time, versions of test containers came out in various different languages. And what that resulted in, it resulted in developers really pooling on that technology. Fundamentally, under the covers, of course, it leveraged Docker, the underlying containerization technology, to make it happen. But over time, as the technology was evolving, it was quickly capturing developer attention, and now knowing inside of Docker, it became one of the more popular technologies out there for using containers overall. And that, of course, enabled us to go and build a company around this. My co-founder was one of the, he's, I think, second maintainer of the project, and really the one who made it popular all around the world. That enabled us to go, as the company launched, to be able to get developers engaged with us from some of the largest companies around the world. And that also enabled us to go have conversations with large partners, right? When we were building the company, lots of great partnerships that we've built with whole different types of vendors, from database vendors to companies like Docker and others. Because fundamentally, at the core, we were building a technology that was a developer-first technology developers loved, right? It was technology that was used by companies. Companies would go and blog about their use of test containers and how they're able to achieve end-to-end scenarios, testing scenarios and outcomes using test containers. And those are like the companies like DoorDash and others that had, and Uber and many others that publicly talked about their use of test containers as a technology to go and achieve real developer productivity and real developer value. And that's what fundamentally, at the end of the day, was something that, at the time, Docker is so valuable in what we were building. And that's what led to the outcome that we have right now, where we've been lucky to join Docker and help go on a journey together with underlying technologies that allowed a lot of this to happen.
Amazing. So I heard a couple of very interesting aspects of this, and these are recurring themes on the show. A lot of startup founders probably will have heard over and over again. Heard community building, finding that developer community, connecting with the right people. And then I heard partnerships, which, while I'd love to say that we hear about all the time, I think maybe is even underrepresented in terms of how we hear the people telling this story. People often talk about their customers. They talk about how they build communities, but the partners that they really leverage to help them grow. And I assume even Docker was probably your partner while you were at AtomicJar, right? And that maybe that partnership was part of the evolution toward, the acquisition as well. So let maybe double click a little bit just into the story of the partnership at AtomicJar. And then now your role also, I believe, has partner in it as well, and how that sort of became maybe part of your career arc as well.
So I've been doing partnerships for many, many years. That's how Michael and I got connected in previous lives, where he was at Microsoft at the time, and I was at Pivotal. So I've been kind of in this interaction between developers. So fundamentally, at my core, I'm a developer by trade. I've been in developer tools for pretty much my whole career. So starting from early days at AWS, Microsoft eventually was working on a developer platform. Then Pivotal and its focus on developers was something that resonated with me very much. When I joined AtomicJar, we were super early, right? One of the things we did have, and again, the credit there goes to my co-founders and the technology, is we had a huge community, right? And the focus for us as an organization was to build a business around the huge community, a business that could sustain the community going forward and grow the community. And what we did is we started to concentrate on a couple of angles of that. Number one, we said, okay, the community is great. We have people who are super excited about the technology. Why don't we recognize some of the people that lead the community? And actually, what we did is we launched Testcontainers Champions program, right? And that's a badge and that's a recognition for people who were really championing the technology all over the world. And that created an interesting dynamic where those champions wanted to go and continue talking about us, they were proud of that designation, and they were interested in continue pushing the technology and what it enabled them to do, right? That's kind of somewhat influenced by the idea that Microsoft had early in the days with MVPs, right? So that was first vector that we did. Docker today runs a similar program called Docker Captains, right? Where there are captains that go all over the world and advocate to a certain degree or are recognized for the work that they're doing. The second thing we did at AtomicJar is realizing that while we were building technology on behalf of the developer, what it also enabled is it enabled a better user experience for companies that database companies or message broker companies. Oh, there we go. Apologies. My camera over here decided that it overheated. So I'm going to restart the camera.
All right, no worries.
As we go over
We're
here.
switching to radio mode, folks. I'll switch mine off too. Well, I'll go off camera. That'll make an interesting video.
The camera ain't collaborating.
I mean, you've probably done enough demos in your life to know that anything live always is going to have something go wrong.
Correct.
Rules from AWS loves to say everything breaks all the time. Well, today it's the cameras, folks. The cameras are breaking. So bear with us. I kind of appreciate this, though.
To what Eli was saying about building champions, I do think that's an incredibly important piece. And I would argue that, as we would love to take credit for that at Microsoft, I think we were taking the playbook from the VMware guys who did it better than anyone I've ever seen. And so the VMware guys came out of nowhere. I was at Microsoft at the time. They started taking our champions from us. And what was happening is VMware came in with this abstraction technology and allowed developers and other people to do things faster in the organization, which meant that they were using this technology to add value to their company, and that was part of their personal brand. And so because VMware made their advocates more important to the company, that built tremendous loyalty between the advocates who built their brand within the company, was built around it. And then when we came in a couple of years later and tried to displace these, and these were our old champions, they became VMware people, we did not displace them because the loyalty was there because there was value add. The technology added so much value to the company. It added so much value to the brand of the person, and you had an advocate for life within that company. And so there's a huge statement to be made of ensuring that your technology is good, that you support your people, and if you support your people, the people who are using your technology will take you insanely far. But without those people, I don't care how good your technology is. And so I can't stress enough what Eli was saying there, and he's also a former VMware, so he can take credit for some of that too. But it is an incredibly important thing, and that's the one thing that we've seen where success happens is where you built your advocates.
The other thing we've done, as I started talking about, is we realized that while we were servicing the developer, we were also improving the developer experience for a lot of message brokers, for database companies. If you thought, if you, we kind of sat back and said, okay, if developer wants to start using Mongo or Postgres or any of those technologies, the reality is a lot of times they would try using those technologies using test containers, right? It's actually the easiest way to go and use those from the comfort of your IDE. And what we said, okay, we had those integrations. We called them test containers modules. We built a program around this to recognize those the companies that were able to take over the modules and be the ones responsible for them. So we called it Test Containers Official Modules Program. And that all of a sudden created a narrative for us and those companies to go and co-market together. And it didn't cost anyone anything, right? It was really just an exercise in, on the one hand, we serve as a community. The community now recognized that not only was test containers, the developers of test containers standing behind those integrations, but the actual company was stepping up. Awesome. It generated value to the company because now the company had a better integration, a better way for developers to get using this. It's also generated value for us because all of a sudden we had the megaphones of those large organizations that were going out and talking about the integration that test containers allows it to do. Now, all of a sudden, we're like this, not a big startup. We were big in our minds, but we were able to, to get leverage out of those organizations and for them, marketing a technology is quite straightforward. Like, it's not like you just talk to their marketing teams. They're quite happy about this. It's not no skin off their back to a certain degree, right? And it's really playing the ecosystem game where you're trying to derive value, you're trying to leverage things, but in the end of the day, you're doing it in the interest of your underlying customer, which in our case was the developer, right? So that's kind of what we've done and how we've been able to grow the community, grow the ecosystem around us, and be bigger than what we really were, which was a very small company.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kamal, it's 20 minutes. I haven't pulled you into this conversation yet. So I've been a poor host. So let me drag you into this conversation here. So you also are a small company that I think is punching ahead of your weight class at Omnistrate. And you also have a huge role in this DevX experience. So I want to sort of take this foundation that we've set up, talking about Docker, talking about testing, and talking about how that helps customers to grow and scale. And then sort of pivot this and think in terms of the developer experience for SaaS as you see it through the lens of Omnistrate. How do you see the sort of continuation of this journey that we've already been on in terms of developer experience?
I think it's, as Eli mentioned, I think there are several parts to it. I think there are, I think we already see with all the AI, for example, how everybody is trying to, we've seen several platforms who are trying to make it easy to build applications quickly and try to build a multi-tenant SaaS very quickly. I think the developer experiences, if you just look at it, how much developer experience have been uplifted in the last 1 year from where we were with the products like Lovable and Replit and V0, Versa, right? So I think there's a lot of advancement over there. I think we will continue to see developer experience as one of the things where, where not only from the perspective of building the application, but also how do you now distribute and scale those applications. And so a similar experience will be expected. And how do you, operate this massive business at scale? So that developer experience will become one of the central key elements. Now, developer experience doesn't stop at the product, as Eli mentioned. I think it goes far beyond that. And so you have to also bring in community, you have to also bring in champions who can educate and evangelize right throughout the world, and basically setup champions to really just talk about and make people aware that there are new experiences possible, and the old experiences and the way that things have been done could be challenged, and we can reimagine the experiences, and that could make the overall productivity better for the SaaS side. So
yeah, absolutely. Let me kick that back to you too. So you're also, Docker is also continuing along this journey of SaaS builders, of helping to unblock us and help us to develop and continue to build and grow and scale new products. Let's get a little bit future looking in this. How the strategy that you at Docker see going forward in terms of the importance of developer experience, how you're enabling that developer and community experience, and let's decide to think of the next, what are we talking about 5 years from now when we come back and we're talking about DevX and Docker? What's the journey look like for developers on your platform today?
So I think there is a recognition that the types of applications that developers are building is evolving.
Yeah.
Right? There is general understanding that your 3-tier application that was of yesteryear, people are still building, but in reality, increasingly so. Number one, we are seeing models become an integral part of the infrastructure of what people are building, right? So there's lots of SaaS applications that continuing to build SaaS, but as opposed to just a database backend and front end, there is now a database model or models,
Right.
backend and a front end. So there is people who use AI as part of their developer, as part of their application, right? And there are different and there is a new class of applications that is emerging, such as AI agents, right? And those are agentic workflows, or people who are building the people that are building applications where the workflow is a lot of times controlled by the LLM, right? So those are two different types of applications that we're seeing, and the building blocks in those start evolving.
Yeah.
Right. So fundamentally, we've recently released Docker Model Runner that enables one to run models locally in OCI compliant ways, where the model can become just one part of the application. Right. We've recently released MCP catalog, MCP toolkit, MCP gateway, enabling those types of experiences to be leveraged as you're building an application. And increasingly, we're also looking at how are people building applications, how we can help people who are building applications with the likes of Cloud Code or other technologies. How can Docker play a role in those experiences? Because fundamentally, the technology is used throughout, whether it's a building block, whether it's an isolation layer, or what have you. Those are all important parts of how one builds an application. So where the actual experience, or how people are going to build the application, changes over time, the primitives oftentimes stay similar, and we believe we have lots to contribute to the journey of developers who are building applications now and in the future.
Nice.
Let me jump in real quick on that. I do want to just throw in my hat in terms of being a little bit of a Docker fanboy, and because of Cloud Code and because of these, because of the change in development, there's a whole bunch of people who kind of developed before but are now suddenly doing it. There's a whole bunch of front end engineers who were terrified of the back end but are now saying, no, I understand the basics, and I didn't understand those languages, but I understand how it works. And so there were a year ago, there were a ton of services that were out there saying, hey, if you're a front engineer, I'll do the back end for you. There were services out there saying, if you're a back end engineer, I'll do the front end for you. And those, I think, are going away. I think those are going to be some of the casualties to the AI. And I think people are going back to the basics. And I think the basics at the end of the day is Docker, and it is a lot of the things that Docker is doing, especially as Eli started to show, hey, test locally. So you can build an app locally, you can test this app locally, and then through the magic of tools out there like Omnistrate and the amazing presence that is AWS, you can take this locally develop this application and deploy it anywhere, and know that you can deploy it anywhere. And so there was a whole 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there was a huge amount of investment in all these additional tooling that was going to stand between you and AWS, you and Kubernetes, you and Docker containers. I think AI is eating those layers. I think it's too easy for the developers to build those layers themselves, and I think there's going to be a back to basics push. And at the end of the day, basics in most cloud enterprise applications is Docker, and being able to build that locally, test that locally, deploy that locally, know that it works locally, and then be able to press a button and deploy that out for a company like JP Morgan to be able to use. That's something that we've never seen before, but I think we're going to see it. So I think because of the technologies of AWS, because of the technologies of Docker, and because of the AI revolution, I think we're closer to that, the mythical one-person unicorn thing. I do think that's more and more possible, and I think it's more and more possible because we're going back to the basics, and the basics in the dev experience is a lot of what Docker provides.
I think fundamentally, and this is really the industry, the pipelines, the processes, the things have evolved to a point where the primitive that is used to package software and to construct software a lot of times is containers, right? That's fundamentally what the industry has evolved into, and Docker has been a big part of it. I personally can't claim any ownership of that because I've joined Docker a year and a half ago. But fundamentally, as a technology, that's what the majority of the world is using. And as a result, when new emerging technologies evolve, such as AI, come into the picture, the same problems that existed in the past in larger organizations. How do you monitor it? How do you deploy it? How do you run it on one environment and another environment and have a similar experience and like all of those problems still remain, even though what you're building is applications that are powered by AI or applications that leverage AI. And those problems, and yes, you can edit code faster and you can build things faster because of AI, but the underlying problems don't go away, right? And all of those issues are still here, and there's even more things that are needed in order to go and solve them.
Yeah. Do you at Docker see a shift in terms of the type of customers who are coming to you and the challenges that you mentioned several interesting products like the building MCP specific tooling, building things specific to agentic solutions. Is this, sort of from AWS, we always say working backwards from your customer. Is this the demand you're hearing from the customers, or is it sort of thought leadership where you guys are seeing this coming and trying to get ahead of it?
The answer is both. The answer is the reality that many customers and developers are looking for solutions, right? But also if in developer tooling and in the space, you have to innovate and you have to go where the puck is going, and you have to provide tooling that developers would then leverage. Right. So fundamentally for us, it's yes, customers are interested. Yes, they want to talk. Yes, they're asking, but also we're thinking of, okay, here are the set of principles, the set of things that developers want to do. How can we help them through those journeys? And it's an interesting dance between the two, right? Because if you only listen to what the ask is, you're gonna build faster horses. On the other hand, right? So like there is always a mix and match between the two, right? So it's both leading and understanding what the needs are and trying to introduce things, and also doing what customers are asking for and building the things that are requested.
Nice. Yeah, Kamal, let me pull you back in here too, because I think there's an interesting part of this arc of we're building things faster. So the developer experience is getting better. As a developer, I can go spin up a Docker container, I can deploy it out, and it takes me minutes instead of hours or days as it used to. So I can create more faster as a developer, but this also lets like Pandora out of the box, right? Or some sort of box of Pandora. There's a saying there somewhere. That now as an innovator, I might not even know how to manage these applications that I'm creating. I might be able to spin out 100 applications in a few days, and they're cool, but nobody's really talking about the developer experience of how you get those to production, how you manage them, how you think about the holistic part of this journey, because that developer part of the production application is actually relatively small, like innovation up front. Then there's all of the other things about building and selling and managing and operating a solution. And I don't think we've really pulled that into the conversation. So as you think about agentic SaaS, Kamal, like how does this arc kind of continue to evolve going forward?
I think you're hitting on the nail, because there's one part of the world where the developers who are building the application needs a mechanism to be locally be able to test it. Now they have built something, you have tested, okay, everything looks good, they checked in, or they get some code reviews and things. Now what? Right? How is that application going to go in production? How is it going to get deployed and get in the hands of the customer? And that's where the distribution comes into the play. And I think there are, when we talk about distribution, you have to fundamentally start from customer. You have to, who is the customer? You have to represent the customer. What do they want? What subscription they want? And what kind of, what is the representation of that customer? What are they looking for? Because not one size may fit all, and so you may have a group of customers or customer segments that we call it, right? And you may have an offering for each of them. Now they may have a different requirements. One may be enterprise customers say, no, particular cloud, particular region, I want to be in a my own account, and they may have a very stringent requirements around that. Other maybe, all I care is, guys, just an endpoint. I don't care like where it runs, how it runs. You scale it, you make it perform, you secure it. Like I don't want to know, right? And so
Right.
there are very different characteristics, and rightly so, for the needs of the customers. And how do you now, not only from the perspective of meeting their deployment requirements, where they are deployed, but also there may be differences in feature set, there may be differences in pricing of these things. So how do you now capture the things with respect to deployments, infrastructure, the operations, the billing, and put it all together, that it not only serves from the perspective of the customers, that they can come in and get, self-serve themselves in many ways, right, or whatever characteristics, but also you can run this thing autonomously. Like you don't put a person. I remember there was James Hamilton when he joined. I mean, I still remember it was back in, I believe, very early, even before 2010. And when he joined AWS, one of the first talks he talked about was he published a paper was where he talked about system to administrative ratio. And it's like, and I mean, it's surprising to see what we are talking about now. In some ways, he was talking about that. Hey, look, your service is not self-serving or autonomous if you don't get to the scale of 20. Like I think he projected around. It has to be thousands to one ratio. So meaning that you cannot be, if you have, for every 10 deployments you have on one person, you have to have to the team. That's not a business. Like you're not going to be able to scale with that business. If you're really looking for autonomous systems, you are looking for 2,500 to 1 or even more. And he was talking about like how is it possible to actually achieve those. And in the past, some of the services that he built at Microsoft before that was able to achieve that. This was all pre-AI era. So imagine in the today's AI era, right? There's all the perspective from the how this whole thing gets secure, the compliances from the making the tenants are isolated from each other, everything is encrypted, making sure from the cost perspective it's cost effective, there are no leaked resources out there, the the bin packing is appropriately done, the infrastructure is rightly shut down if it is not needed to be, how does it scale and how does it perform with respect to the performance, how does it operate if things go down, because dependencies do go down, and how do you deal with it? So when you start talking about looking at from the perspective that everything has to be autonomous, then it becomes its own thing. And there are times where uh, you know even though autonomous system may have handled everything and may have recovered things out of it, you may still want to know, hey, I do want to know what happened last week. There was something happened and there was a spike, and I understand the system has self-healed, but what happened? I need a report, that we call RCA, or in Amazon world COE, right? Without going into much detail. So how do you now, instead of manually filling out those things, and to be able to provide and talk to your customers and provide that information on what happened, can you generate those RCS automatically, right? Can you generate those theories? So there is a full spectrum, as you can see, just from having things running on the desktop to now scaling to thousands and hundreds of thousands of machines and operating them at scale is a yet another challenge. So I think, and that's where I think one of the things that we are trying to basically share that vision with the community as well, to bring together champions and leaders to really just take what Eli started from the desktop to take it to the next point, and how do you take it out in production in the cloud.
Yeah, exactly. Like this arc all the way from, you've unlocked the left-hand side of this for me as a developer. I can go and develop an application quickly. I can put it in Docker. I want to fire this at something and have all of that. I want to have the observability. I want to have compliance. I want to have multi-tenancy handled. But at the core of this, I want to be able to make my applications autonomous, send them off somewhere, because increasingly technologies like MCP and A2A are making self-discovery and all of the different flows of these things kind of automagical, right? I can simply create enough tooling and put it out there and say, listen, I'm describing the problems that I want to solve, but I just want to be able to enunciate, like, this is the problem I have today. Take all these tools that I've created and solve these problems. So I don't want to be in the business of operating all of those things, but I want to be able to build as many of those as possible. And this is the story arc that I think is really interesting. You're sort of thinking about Docker and Omnistrate together, about how we get through those and how we think about the building of those.
And if I can add real quick, a lot of people hear autonomous and the rest, and they think, oh, okay, that's because it's fun, or that's because it's going to be cheaper for me to do, or that's going to be, that's going to give me economic benefits. All of those statements are true, but that's not the reason we went to this in IT when we started it. We went to this because autonomous means consistency, and consistency is the only way to do IT in a secure way. So the only way you can roll things out is to do them consistently. The only way you can ensure that your developers are developing against the same is to do things consistency. And so while you can look at all the tools Docker provides and the tools that Omnistrate provides and say, hey, this is going to make me go faster, it will. And it's just going to make me do it easier, it will. But it's also going to bring consistency to your build environment, consistency to your testing environment, and consistency to your deployment environment. And without consistency, we're not building real companies.
Yeah, and the cost as well. I'll throw that out there, because when I think about Docker, one of the things that immediately jumps in my mind is, as I'm testing and building an application, if I had to deploy it every time and test that on my cloud environment, it would cost me 10 times as much. And I've run into customers where their developer environments cost as much as their production environments. And my head immediately explodes. I was like, how are you surviving this? Like, there's so much we can do just developing locally with just better practices. And I mean, maybe not for everyone, but for me, again, I came from a Java background as well. Docker has been at the very core of that from the very beginning. It's like, I don't have to spin up all of my applications. I don't have to do everything. And it helped to rethink the unit of scale as well, right? Instead of me thinking, I just have a monolith that I'm developing, it's, what can I run in a Docker container? How can I make that a unit of scale, and then build the next thing and build the next thing? And that's evolved a lot of the best practices. I don't know if we would have had microservices if it wasn't for Docker and containers. Maybe we would have gotten there through some other method. There's other ways people have done things with jars and stuff. But to me, that was always at the core at it, because you're actually testing the networking, testing the operations of things, testing the inputs and outputs, all of those things, instead of just like, we'll pretend we're doing all of those things and test my code as if it was actually running on some sort of IO network. So it's a pretty cool part of that journey for sure.
Well, and in the era of AI, back in the day, we used to have a concept called follow the sun, where we turn on. Now we're following the cheap GPU. And so wherever you can find the cheapest GPU is where you want to be running your testing today. And a lot of the tools that Docker and Omnistrate provide is allowing these companies to rapidly shift. And if, hey, it turns out I can get that instance in Singapore pretty cheap, then let's move our testing over to Singapore. And now we're in Germany. And so the concept of moving is because of where your developers are. It's because of where your customers are. And it's also because this is where I can get the resources I happen to need today at the price I need to have it. And it's a concept we've never faced before, but now we're taking it for granted. And it's because of these technologies that we can do it.
Yeah.
But even also in my mind, it's like, if you look at how applications are getting built today, right? There's lots, like the era of cloud computing. In a lot of ways, there are kind of two approaches that companies advocated. There is the cloud first approach, or a particular cloud first approach. So you're building tying yourself up for all AWS services, or all Azure services, or all Google services. And there was this approach that was being advocated by many developers and open source companies, where you build something that can be deployed on any cloud, right? And it's becoming even more so through the lens of what Michael just mentioned. So it's not only cheap GPUs, but where you're going to run your compute, and your GPU is going to shift with the shift. So through that lens, hey, it's becoming ever more important to build in a portable way, while many in the cloud ecosystem would want developers to build in an AWS first or Azure first kind of way. Many developers and many companies are saying, actually, we want to have the portability because there are regions, because there is availability of GPUs, because of this and that and the other. And that's becoming ever more important. And as this technology matures and as the space matures, this realization is starting to come to even more people, because when we were in the early days of this, sure, it made sense. You follow, you use what's available. But as people start rationalizing their choices, and people start thinking about how to architect those systems going forward, portability and ability to migrate from place to place is becoming ever more important.
It's critical, and our audience is SaaS developers, and almost every successful SaaS solution I've seen eventually becomes multi-cloud. Maybe not because they want to be, but because their customers need them to be. Right? It's not like, hey, I'm really excited to go learn like 3 different technology stacks and learn how to do this. But if your customer, you have to go to where your customers are, especially if you're building infrastructure SaaS. I mean, then it's absolutely common sense to be closer to your customers. But almost all of the SaaS providers I've talked to and worked with eventually evolve some form of multi-cloud, multi-region, multi-everything solution, because to be successful, you've got to be where your customers are. And that compliance story feeds into that, the performance story feeds into that, the reliability story feeds into that, and of course, customer preference. All of those things create this natural just momentum for being portable and being able to think in proper units about what you built, instead of just like, oh, I just throw this on the stack and it just works. It's no, how do you create it? How do you manage it? How do you run it? And how would you recreate all of those things if you had to at the drop of a hat, whether that was in the same environment, in another region, in another cloud, whatever that looks like? You have to have that mindset of all of these things are my units that I'm building with. And those units need to be small and portable and recreatable, right? And all of those are part of our journey for every SaaS provider I talk to. Yeah.
And region's a lot harder than most people think. And so,
yes.
And we've run into a lot of startups who say, yeah, I can deploy in any region. Well, as long as the core infrastructure stays on AWS West 2, but the rest goes into the other regions. And they're saying, yeah, you're not hearing me. My customer is a German customer. Nothing can touch the United States.
Yes.
Oh, no, I can't do that. But and so when we say multi-cloud, a lot of people are thinking it means stepping outside. Just inside of AWS is a ton of diversity within the different spaces, and understanding regional differences is a full-time job.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think I want to pivot a little bit. We're starting to run short on time. We did talk a little bit in the beginning about ecosystems, partnerships. Eli, you have alliances in your title. I said partner before. Partner alliances is pretty close, at least in my mind. But there's a very interesting aspect that we haven't talked about. As a Docker customer, I'm a really bad Docker customer. I don't usually pay for Docker, but I get to take advantage of all of the work that you guys have done because you're such an amazing partner in the open source community. You've contributed tons to all developers in terms of open source. And at the same time, you've managed to balance that with commercial success. And like, that's a difficult, line to toe. Lots of companies I know struggle with this mentality of how we like open source. We appreciate the concepts, but we have to make money as well. Could you talk just a little bit in your own experience at AtomicJar, at Docker, throughout your journey? How have you balanced this open source versus commercial concept?
I mean, in general, right? Like, so while open source is great and, people love using open source and many developers like contributing to open source, if you want to do it, if you want to build if you want to contribute in meaningful ways, one needs to find a commercial basis in order for that to happen. And the commercial basis, many companies are trying to do it in various ways, right? Many companies have tried and approached it from various angles, right? Different approaches for different companies. Docker has found our monetization scheme. Others have looked at others, but it's never a trivial thing. It's never a thing that is you're trying to optimize for multiple. You're trying to optimize for both continuing to develop the community and all of that the developers have done, and also find ways for commercial organizations that are benefiting commercially from your technology to be able to contribute and to be able to sustain the technology underneath it all. So at AtomicJar, we looked at it in a very similar way. In our journey with AtomicJar, we tried to look at, hey, how can we go and add value on top of open source that we can go and monetize? Docker is in a very similar way, right? It's how do we go and build things on top of open source that provide value and that companies can use?
Yeah, it's an amazing balance, and I do think Docker is probably up there in terms of the best I've seen in terms of managing this journey. Now, kind of tying that into, I think you also end up partnering with a lot of other open source companies. Does that play a role in sort of how you're able to evolve these commercial offerings? Is, hey, we're in this open source community. If you want to build a stack, you're going to have to pay for the stack at some point. But we have all of these open source partners and we can build a stack that's open source, or is that just sort of an ancillary benefit of what you're doing?
So I think, I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to. Maybe
Okay.
if you could
Okay.
rephrase the question slightly. We do partner with lots of different companies in various ways. We do appreciate open source partners that are a very important part of our ecosystem and community. When people talk about partnerships, it means lots of different things for different people. We've done things like, most recently with MCP catalog, where we partnered with many of the MCP producers that have produced MCP servers, and we went and launched with them. All of those things are very different and very bespoke. That's as much as I can probably say.
The answer is better than the question. So we'll let the question go. I was just trying to tie open source into the partnership, but I feel like probably what you're saying is the partnerships are very much just focused on the outcomes you're trying to drive, right? Like MCP catalog, we partner with MCP partners. Open source, it's an aside. It's nice if we can get that too, but there's these very specific topics we're trying to drive with these partnerships.
We partner in open source as well. We partner around technologies. We partner around communities. All of those are things that we do as well, right? It's just different depending on the use case.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like that approach, like thinking about your partnerships from the lens of the use cases that you're trying to do. It's not just, hey, picking random partners. Oh, we want to go partner with Amazon or Microsoft. What are we trying to do with them? What are the outcomes we can drive together is an interesting, important angle to alliances in general. So,
and different partners have different, there's different approaches that we take, and, very openly with our partners.
Absolutely. Now that you've joined, you said you've been at Docker now for about 1.5 years. How has that approach at Docker in terms of expanding this partner ecosystem changed since you joined from AtomicJar? Has your mindset shifted from the small company of like, hey, we're punching above our weight class to we're now one of the bigger companies and we can lead some of these partnerships? Has that evolved your own thinking?
Of course. I mean, the scale is very different between what we were able to do at AtomicJar to what is possible inside of a larger organization such as Docker. Also from the resources, but also through the lens of what's possible, right? Like Docker is a player in the ecosystem in a much bigger way than what we were, right? So what are the types of, things that we can do inside of Docker that would have impact in the community and have impact in the ecosystem? Those are the types of things that are possible here inside of Docker that were much less possible from a tiny little company that we were. So yes, also, our relationship with some of the bigger players is very different, right?
Yeah.
Docker is a player in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that's also is a big differentiator to where, we were as a smaller company at the time. So all of this is different. I'm trying not to go into any particular details.
That's fair. Yeah,
but
totally fair.
High level, those are very different, and what we can do is a lot more.
So I do want to call out one of the things you dropped in passing really quickly there, which was the Docker MCP catalog.
Yeah,
I'm been paying a lot of attention to MCP. I think MCP is a huge chunk of the future and where we're going. I didn't know you guys had the MCP catalog out there, so I'm now in the background Googling this. This is cool. So that shouldn't be just a drop you leave in. That's a mic drop thing. What you guys are doing there is darn cool. And whoever kind of helps shape the future there is going to have even more relevance in the future. And so the relevance Docker's had because of what it's done in the containerization space is impressive. If you take that to the MCP world, the sky's the limit. So that shouldn't be a casual drop through. That's it. Oh, by the way, have you guys seen this? This is darn cool stuff.
Thank you. We're doing a few things. This is one of the things we're fortunate to be able to do.
Awesome.
Can
Go ahead, Kamal.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask Eli just double down because he was trying to side away from some of the details. So I'm going to force him on some of the things. So maybe can you tell a little bit to the audience, like the question that Bill asked about the open source and the commercial side of it, both from the product perspective and the go-to-market perspective, like how does the philosophy play out? Like, you have a lot of things that you're building. So how do you typically decide from the product perspective, what goes into the open source, what goes to the enterprise? Similarly, when you try to do go-to-market, how does the go-to-market team, or in your opinion, or, maybe beyond Docker and just your philosophical view on the go-to-market side, where a lot of people are tied up into, there's one side of the world, hey, there's a pressure on the open source community, because that's also a community to not over-index on the commercial side. And then there's also a pressure from the business side. If you don't do anything on the commercial side, how are you going to make money? And so how do you balance that from the business point of view?
So there's lots of questions you've asked in a single one. What you open source and what you leave commercial. I mean, 10,000 foot is you're trying to create, through open sourcing things, you're trying to create community, you're trying to create, in a lot of ways, you're trying to give tools that are usable by individual developers and produce value to individual developers. That's kind of one angle to this. What you commercialize is, in a lot of ways, things that are, that become useful once you start using them in large enterprises, right? Where a lot of value is being created. So those are general thoughts. Happy to go into more detail in particular use cases, right? But those are general kind of guiding principles of, hey, we want to create the community, we want to give developers the tools that they want to use, but also create an opportunity for the organization to, where we deliver value to larger enterprises, to capture some of the value that we create.
Nice. Yeah, let's take us home here, because I like that thought, and I like a lot of the things we've talked about. I'll kind of give my last thought on this, because we didn't get to this, but as we think about this agentic future, and like we'll make this last sort of our outro sort of like future facing, a lot of the portability stuff that we were talking about early on really resonated with me. One thing we didn't mention is the agentic experience is increasingly making the distribution of applications more complex. Things are running in customer-owned accounts, near customer data, connecting to other environments. I work with partners. I'm seeing lots of customers trying to connect to their different partner stories. What does it mean to use ServiceNow and Salesforce and Mondays and AWS and all of these things together? This agentic story is increasingly making it clear that whatever you're writing may not run anywhere close to where you were originally thinking about. And this is an interesting tie-in to Docker. It's an interesting tie-in to Omnistrate, because keeping a very flexible approach to the agentic experience seems like a prerequisite. So as I'm thinking about the future, I'm really excited about what Docker is doing. I'm excited what Omnistrate is doing. And of course, I'm happy to be here at AWS is being part of this as well. So last thoughts maybe in terms of where you see the future and where we're going to land in the next few years.
Kamal, I'll let you take the lead.
I think the next few years going to be just evolution of the newer autonomous platforms. I think each of the functions that we see in today's business will get automated over time. They will be self-driven. I think there will be people who will be driving as a so-called pilot, and so they will be the pilots, they will be strategists, as opposed to trying to do things on the ground. So all the operational aspects for each and every single function will get automated. And I feel like there will be a new definition of the cloud where today, if you took a look at like AWS, we have 300 or more services, and I think there will be, I imagine, a time where all of these things will come together and from different functions, and there will be higher level of abstractions for businesses to build on top of it. And that's what AI is going to make it possible. I think we are seeing the early sign of it. So
excellent. Cool.
I'm going back to the original, one of the themes I started earlier, which is we saw over the course of the last 4 years a whole bunch of people standing in between the cloud and the application to say, hey, I'm going to make building all this stuff easier. I think those are going to the total number of those who survive is going to reduce, and so I think more and more we're going back to the basics, and I don't think you're going to have 18 vendors in between your application and the cloud. You're probably going to have one or two, and those one or two are going to do very specific, very fundamental things that you just don't want to do for yourself. and that's where the Dockers and containers come in. That's where the Omnistrates come in. But there's a lot of fancy things in between. I think we're going to get back to the basics.
Yeah.
And it's an exciting time. But as one of the guys, so I watched the YC founder series a lot. One of the questions they ask is, if you're building an application today, you need to ask yourself, are you building a product or are you building a feature? Because a feature is going to get swallowed, and it's harder and harder to tell if you're building a product or a feature. But I think a lot of people who thought they were building products are going to find out rather quickly that they were just building a feature. Agreed.
Take us home, Eli.
No, I agree. I think as we are evolving from this early days into something that is starting to become a little bit more mature, and organizations are adopting and trying to ship. A lot of the maturity is, a lot of the practices and a lot of the learnings we've had are going to come back. Yes, the tooling is going to be different, and tooling is going to be more optimized for the use cases, but the same problems still exist, if not more problems that exist for large organizations to adopt this and to be able to derive value. And we as an ecosystem and as an industry are trying to provide solutions that would benefit those organizations.
Awesome. I love it. That's a great note to end this on. So it's a wrap, everybody. With that, it's the episode 14 and accelerating the developer experience and with SaaS testing and Docker. Eli, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.